The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.
With so many people living longer, the fear of outliving your money becomes a reality for many of us. Will I be a financial burden? Will I outlive my money? How will I be remembered? My name is Neil Himmelstein, president of Main Street Planning Group. Please contact me by visiting mainstreetplanninggroup.com. That's mainstreetplanninggroup.com, or call 631-647-4694. I will introduce you to strategies that will guarantee you will not outlive your money, that can guarantee you will not be a burden on your loved ones. Through a collaborative approach, we will uncover solutions that offer tax-efficient strategies, lifetime income, and legacy planning, choice, organization, direction, and education. That is the code we stand behind. Contact mainstreetplanninggroup.com. That's mainstreetplanninggroup.com, or call 631-647-4694. And listen to me every Friday at 3 p.m. as I host the Main Street Code for Financial Success, right here on 103.9 LI News Radio. Good afternoon. Welcome to Main Street Code for Financial Success. I'm your host, Neil Himmelstein. I'm here every Friday at 3 o'clock. If you miss an episode, you can always catch me on Spotify or Apple, or go to themainstreetcode.com. And when we talk about our code, we talk about choice, organization, direction, and education. And we help hundreds of insurance advisors, attorneys, accountants, CPAs, and you with your planning regarding life insurance, annuities, disability, long-term care, and life settlements. And today we are happy to have with us one of my planning partners and good friend, Lawrence Scherer of Scherer and Padel. Say hello, Larry.
Hey, everyone. Hi, I'm Larry.
So Larry is what we call a recovering CPA, as well as an expert estate planning attorney, elder law attorney, and business succession planning. And when I take planning partner, Larry is truly one of my planning partners, and we work together many times with many, many different clients. Wouldn't you say?
More than just a few.
More than just a few. So one of the things I want to talk about today, Larry, is life insurance has three components. It has an insured, and, you know, insurance companies look at insurable interest and all that. We could talk about that. It has an owner and has a beneficiary. It has three separate components. Now, what I want to talk to you today is one of the components is ownership. So tell me some of the different ways you can own a life insurance policy.
Well, you can own a life insurance policy on yourself. You can own a policy on a spouse or the family member, or you can set up a trust or an entity to hold the life insurance policy when you have specific plans that you need to reach.
And why would I want to do that? Why? Well, let's talk about what's the difference between who owns my policy. So, I mean, from a tax point and a legal standpoint, let's say I own my own policy and I pass away. What goes on?
Well, you have an interesting asset because you didn't get the benefit of your life insurance generally during your life, but you're going to be taxed on it. So it is part of the assets that are including your estate tax, even if they aren't income taxable.
Interesting. So they say it's not federally taxable, but it could be part of my estate. So if I bought $1 million life insurance, and let's say my estate was only worth, $5 million, whatever, it would now be worth $6 million, correct?
Absolutely.
Right. So that could create a tax at some point. So, a lot of people might just own their policy. Now, what if someone else owned my policy, my spouse, for instance, or my business partner?
Well, the asset, when they turn from policy into proceeds, meaning you've died, that becomes non-taxable income to the recipient, and it's not part of your estate unless you've retained something called an incidence of ownership.
Gotcha. So, okay, so there might be a reason why. And then what happens if a trust or a third party owns it?
Well, if a trust owns a policy and the trust was set up with the policy in it from day one, there will be no inclusion in the estate tax, which is a fantastic result meaning that the money is available to pay for debts, including estate taxes. However, it just has to be very carefully drafted.
Okay. Now, there's different types of trusts, and we can go into that. What happens if a company owns the policy?
Well, there could be some negative effects to the value of the business. If I own 50% of the company and the company has a life insurance policy on me, the company's asset value has been increased by the proceeds from the life insurance.
Now, this is new. It never used to be that way.
Well, it's clarified.
Okay.
What happened was you had different circuits in the United States, and each circuit is a federal court. And each one of those circuits had its own interpretation of the valuation basis increase that comes from owning life insurance.
So there was a big lawsuit about this. And what happened is people set up what they call a buy-sell agreement. I like to call it a business will. And what happened is, because the value of the life insurance increased the value of the business when one of the partners died, then the shares got all messed up to the rest of the partners.
Right.
And in addition, it created an estate tax. I wanted to talk to you about that also, because people don't realize when they're in business that their business is part of their estate.
Oh, it's a very big part for many of them, maybe even their biggest.
And this is why when you're doing planning that you have to include, this is why I like to work with Larry, because this is one of the aspects that a lot of people miss when they're doing life insurance planning or estate planning, is they don't look at the value of their business when they're doing that planning. Would you agree to that?
Absolutely. We very often will ask a business valuation person to give us an estimate or an actual valuation of the business so we can base our planning upon it.
So we're working together. Larry will be working on a situation where some very wealthy individuals, and like I said, I like to bring Wall Street down to Main Street, because people think, Larry does a lot of high net worth people, but you may or may not be of high net worth, but a lot of these concepts we talk about may seem, wow, that's really it doesn't appeal to me, but apply to me, but they end up applying to you if you don't work with the right people, because it happens. So we're working with a situation now where we have clients who did the right thing. They set up a life insurance trust to own their policy, and it was a $10 million policy. And then somebody came around, he says, well, I want my company to pay for it. And then they switched it from owning it in a trust to where if they passed, it would pass through their estate. And now the business is paying for it, and the business took ownership of it. And then the business now has it on the books as ownership. So then that $10 million, instead of being estate tax free, now moves over to the business where it's taxable.
Yep.
And the reason I bring this up, because it's such a flaw, is even the high net worth people that think they're doing the right thing may be getting bad advice, and then they forgot all about the trust they set up. Have you seen this happen before?
I have seen it many times. I've also seen where they just set up a trust, thinking, I set up a trust. They didn't transfer the assets in. That is the biggest flaw in estate planning, not following through with the assets being structured correctly. Give me 1 second. When I started writing my newsletters, which I've been doing for years, the very first article was estate planning in a beautiful old suit. And it talks about how I had bought a suit and it has a 34-inch waistband. You don't, in the audience, have to see me to know it doesn't get past my calves. That being said, it's a very expensive piece of clothing that doesn't fit because it doesn't cover my assets. Same thing happens if you have a trust. If you don't move the assets in, it doesn't cover your assets.
Right. And a lot of people don't change with the times either, because it used to be when you did a buy-sell agreement, having the corporation buy the policies was a common thing.
Yep.
But up until recently, they changed the tax code. So this is why you have to stay up to date with all your planning. And we have a lot of businesses that we've done buy-sells for that have never had their valuation updated, number one, which is important that you have to do. But also, they never look at their policies, and they think they've done the right thing, and they may have at the time. Well, when you bought the 34-inch waist suit.
Fit me beautifully.
Fantastic. But if you don't keep up to date with your stuff, things do change. So ownership of your policy is very important. What we didn't talk about was the beneficiaries. And right after the break, we're going to talk about that. Larry, how does someone get a hold of you if they want to talk more about their situation?
Well, my office is in Garden City, and you can reach out to me by phone, 516-747-7007.
And that's Larry Scherer of Scherer and Perdell. And this is Neil Himmelstein, owner of Main Street Planning Group. If you want to reach me, best way is 631-647-4694, or check me out at themainstreetcode.com. Please reach out to me with any questions that you have, and we'll be right back after a quick break. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. I'm here with Lawrence Scherer of Scherer and Bedell, and Larry's a good friend and planning partner. And before the break, we were talking about business valuation and how critical it is. And Larry was telling me a story about his father. I think he had some sort of printing business, and he was repairing printing machines. And
he made rollers for printing presses. Somebody makes everything. That's what he made.
Excellent. And he did have a buy-sell in place, didn't he?
Yes, and it was secured by a $250,000 life insurance policy, and that was the buy-sell value.
Right. And how long did he have the business?
30 years.
And at year 29, how much business was he doing?
About $750,000 per month.
Oh, my goodness. So the $250,000 life insurance, was it ever updated or?
Never. They never looked at the document a second time. They had it drafted by someone who wasn't a trust and estate attorney.
Right.
And it didn't fit them.
Probably when you were a wee child and you weren't engaged in, nor were you involved in that side of the business.
No. It would have been different.
So what happened? So how many partners did he have?
He had one partner.
Okay. I guess the business was sold before that ever he passed and everything, correct?
Yes, it was. And had it not, and my father passed or his partner passed, it would have been a $250,000 on paper purchase of 50% of a very profitable business.
Oh, boy. So your mom would have been?
My mom or my father's partner's wife would have been cut out potentially.
Wow. This is why planning is so important. And we see this all the time where things are not planned properly and things happen. So
plus the laws change.
The laws change tremendously. So life insurance is something you have to keep up with as well as your other documents, and the value of your business is so important, and it's an important part of your whole asset base when you're doing planning. And I could see I see a lot of life applications from other agents that bring them to me, and it doesn't ask on the application itself, what's the value of your business? It never does. So people go through their house and their car, and they'll walk out the door, and they never ask them, hey, what's the value of your business? And sometimes people don't even know, or sometimes people don't even consider it, and that becomes a real problem in planning. Now, the other biggest issue that we see in this ownership issue, we run into every day of the week, especially with businesses. It's tragic what I'm seeing out there. Even businesses that are doing great and people that are very successful, they don't realize the impact of ownership. The other thing they don't realize is the impact of the beneficiary of the policy. Now, what happens when someone passes with a life insurance policy, period? You have your will, maybe you have some trust, but what happens specifically to life insurance and your 401k and your retirement vehicles and your bank accounts? What happens?
Well, those are usually controlled by contractual designations called beneficiary designations. And there could be some very bad planning by just leaving it with paid to my spouse or paid to my children. Imagine one of your children has just gotten into a medical issue and is receiving Medicaid benefits, and now a $250,000 payment is handed to them. That money is going to be either going to stop them from qualifying for the benefits that they need, or it could actually be seized by the Department of Social Services, depending on state law.
Wow, that's scary. And there's another thing that happens with divorces. What happens, you divorce and you didn't change your beneficiary. So your ex-wife could get, well, we're seeing that a lot. Another one we see that a lot is, especially with new people selling life insurance or something, and they don't know, and the client doesn't know, oh, just leave it to my estate. What happens there?
Well, now you have to probate. And probate is a process where I have to go to a court, ask a judge to appoint somebody to do exactly what's in the four corners of the documents that I put together, as opposed to setting up a trust, and then I appoint the person, and they're instantaneously in control of the assets.
So setting up a trust often for life insurance policies could be a good idea because it keeps it out of the estate. It also gives you a level of protection. And, we worked on something together where you worked on it for a while and then you gave it to me, where somebody really needed to protect the value of their life insurance. Tell me a little bit about that without, what the deal was there.
I'm going to ask you which one of the thousands of cases we've worked on we're talking about.
Okay,
here.
well, this was a situation where I think the person had a high-risk profession and was very concerned about possibility of being sued and didn't want any value of life insurance to be in his name, so he wanted to move it into a trust.
Okay. Well, that is asset protection in the form of using a trust to hold and contain the assets so they don't become part of the debtor's estate should a client, let's say a gentleman is the owner of a policy, and he wants to make sure the spouse is going to be taken care of, and he has a tremendous amount of debt potentially in the form of malpractice insurance or something like that, malpractice cases, and wants to make sure the assets are outside the grip of a potential creditor. You can use a trust. It's something that we do also just by setting up Medicaid protections. Sometimes you need you have a child who's got some sort of autism or another disability, and you want to make sure that their assets are protected from being lost to the government's claims.
That's a big deal. So in doing planning like you do, and we talked about special needs trusts and this and that, you cannot leave assets, like a lot of people want to do the right thing and they want to leave their home to their 3 kids, right? That's always their plan. But one of the children, whether had a drug dependency, they're autistic, or they're on government services, and they get left the house, let's say. Let's say they just get left the house. Okay. What happens there?
In many cases, they're incapable of carrying the cost of the house.
Okay.
They're not generating enough income to support the real estate taxes, insurance, heat, light, electric, taking care of any of the other things, right up to their Hulu account.
But you also said, well, let's say they're using government aid because, like you said, maybe they're autistic or mentally impaired or drug dependent, but they get this house. What happens with Medicaid and those social services?
Yeah. Medicaid can make a claim, or any of the government entities can make a claim against that asset. And then at the very best we can do is a self-funded supplemental needs trust, which means that I'll hold it for the remainder of his life or her life, but then it has to be sold and repaid over to the government to reimburse them for the monies that they laid out.
But it's better to prepare for that and set up a special needs trust for any inheritances. So a lot of times, if one of the things we do in my world and your world is, okay, listen, let's say my net value of everything's worth $1 million, and I want to treat my kids equally, but one of my kids is impaired. So one of the strategies is to take a small amount of my assets and buy a life insurance policy just to supply the special needs trust to take care and make sure that child is taken care of, and yet he can still benefit from any government aid that he has or whatever. So special needs trust, I'm just trying to say how we interplay all the time with setting up our policies, the beneficiaries, and how it's all set up.
Right. One of the major parts of estate planning is worrying about the dispositive provisions. Who's going to get what and how do we protect them?
You know, Larry, we could talk about this all day long. I swear I can't believe our time's just about up. How can somebody get a hold of you and talk more about these kind of things?
Again, my office is in Garden City, and I can be reached by phone at 516-747-7007.
And the name of your firm is?
Scherer and Pudell.
And this is Neil Himmelstein, and the best way to get a hold of me is 631-647-4694. I encourage your comments, concerns, and glad to sit with you, no charge, just to go over what you need and see if we can't put you on the right path. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station,